Look, the Benelli's back. Yep, that's right, the Benelli is back. Reason why is because now we have something to modify. It hasn't been prominently featured because really all I've been doing is just riding it, and there's not many modifications that I've had to do in the last couple months. I took care of a lot of that stuff in the first couple months of ownership, the kind of the easy stuff, more or less, the things that I knew I wanted to do and that was relatively easy to take care of, things like controls, brakes, chain, all that good stuff. And so now we're kind of getting into the more complicated modifications. So today what we're doing is replacing the cam with a DCR cam. And I've actually had this sitting around for quite a while, but I just haven't really wanted to get into it for a number of reasons. One, this head is really difficult to get to, and after that 600-mile service, I wasn't really looking forward to doing it anytime soon. Also, the other side of this with the cam comes a tune, so I have to think of a way to tune this thing, and the most common one is an A-Racer or a Power Commander, and those ones are pretty expensive, and I didn't want to throw down that kind of money right away. However, I actually found an alternative to the tuning that seems to be cheaper, and we'll get into that a little bit later. For the time being, what I did was tore down everything, as you can see, everything down to the head, and pretty much where we were with the 600-mile service with the valve adjustment. So we're just going to take it one step further and actually pull out the cam and put in the new cam from DCR, and then we're going to retime and recheck the valves and put it all together. But first, let's take a look at the cam that we're putting in. Alright, so here it is in all its glory. This is the cam, and this is what's going to be replaced. Basically, it's just a rod with a couple of bearings on either side, and then in between are some specifically placed lobes with specific angles and height and all that good stuff. So as the engine spins like this, it'll push up or push down the various valves on either side, the intake and the exhaust side. Thankfully, it does come with specs, so that's good. So once everything is in there, we can check the valve clearance, because it's not necessarily going to be the same as the stock, although taking a quick look at this, it looks like it's actually the same as stock. Either way, we're definitely going to be checking this once everything's all put back together. Okay, so here we are. Pretty much what we were looking at when we were checking the valves with the 600-mile service, but what we're going to do is actually pull out the cam, which is right here behind this bolt. So basically, this is the end of the cylinder and it goes all the way through, and what we need to do in order to get to this is a couple of things, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but we're going to take this slow and make sure that we make note of everything that we're doing so that it can be put back in the correct order. So I think the first thing is going to take these 4 bolts off so that this plate is up and out of the way. Then we need to basically just break this nut right here and undo it so that this chain will come off of the cam, and then we can put this to the side, and then the cam should slide right out, and then we can slide the new one in, reorient it, make sure that it's still at top dead center, and then we can reverse the process, tighten this up, tighten these bolts back up, and put the plate back in. So let's get cracking. Okay, so it doesn't look like I've done anything, but I have. So I took a look at these bolts and actually pulled a couple out, and they're super long. They go all the way down to the cylinder, and underneath this plate is not much. There's no other fittings or anything else like that that I have to worry about, so I don't think we actually have to pull this off at all. And we got this cracked loose. That was really tough. This thing is on there super tight, and there's no real easy way to keep this from moving back and forth, even putting it in gear. Ended up using the clutch tool, the little tabs here. Thankfully, even though this is pretty big, thankfully it was able to fit onto the cam gear enough that I could crack this. So now that this is loose, we're ready to keep going. But before we do, one thing I want to point out, because I did this with the Grom's cam when I was replacing that, and it's super helpful. This makes it a lot easier when you're putting things back together. And so what I did up here is that I zip tied the cam chain to the gear so that it's basically one piece, and will stay together so that when we pull this out and put it back in, we know exactly where these two should line up. And so that way, when we put it back in, everything should be in time. We'll double check, obviously, but it'll make putting everything in time a lot easier. All right, cam gear is out of the way, kind of pushed off to the side here. Still zip tied, so still in time, quotes. About ready to take this out, and I was pulling on it for more than I'd like to admit, but you can kind of see here and here, there is a circlip that needs to come out, because that's what's holding it in. So I'll get some pliers, pull that out, and then this should slide out easily. Okay, progress. Turns out you do have to take these off because the rocker arms do need to come out. I was kind of hoping I can kind of turn it in such a way that I can get around it, but that's not happening because the back bearing is a lot larger and it does not clear those rockers. So behind these bolts is another little slot that goes back and forth this way to hold the rocker arms in. So that's what I pulled out. These two things with magnets, which kept these in place. Once these are both out, then this was easily removable. All that for this. So now let's just do the painstaking process of reversing it with the new stuff. Much easier putting this back in now that I know exactly how things work. So it's pretty nice, pretty simple. The rods here just slide in nice and easy. Everything fits up pretty perfectly, except I'm running into an issue, and I think I overlooked this when I was taking this off, but if you can see here, I'm pushing up on the cam chain as much as possible, and you see how that hole in there where the bolt goes is not centered, and that's because the cam chain tensioner, which is actually this little guy right here, is still in place. I never took that out, so I have to, I'm not sure if I need to unscrew this center Phillips head or just take off the whole thing, but this basically needs to be let out so that I get enough slack that I can put this back in the spot where it needs to go. Oh man, the clearances here are so tight. I hate this. So I pulled out the whole cam chain tensioner, but in order to do that, there's like this thing from the starter, and then the throttle body's in the way, so you have to kind of loosen it and pull it away as much as you possibly can to just barely get that in there. And then I figured out how this thing works. I have the screw out that sits in there, and then inside that is a tiny little slot for a flathead. And basically when you turn that, you turn the, there's a little piston, or I guess it goes this way, piston that pushes up against the cam chain. So as you turn it, it comes all the way in, and you have to turn it all the way until it locks in place. And then once I put this back in, then you have to kind of like fish another, I actually couldn't get a screwdriver in there, so I used a pick. But once you get this all fitted, then you kind of agitate it enough to trigger the spring so that the piston shoots back out up against this chain. And so there's a little railing, this like black plastic railing thing here, that I was able to actually feel it connect and tighten up, so I know that it's engaged, so that's good. So I can finally put this back on the cam chain tensioner, and that's buttoned up, and then I can put all this stuff back together before I forget how it goes. We still need to check the clearances here, so I need to put it back at top dead center. I did run through it once or twice just to make sure that my zip tie method worked, and it did, thankfully. But now that I have this actually tightened, because that was with the cam chain tensioner loose, I want to make sure that it's still there and that didn't jump a tooth anywhere. So I'm going to realign it, put it back at top dead center so that we can check the valve clearances here, make sure they're still okay, and make any adjustments as necessary on both sides. Then I can finally button this up and be done with it. Valve check-in time. Definitely going to need to adjust these because look at how loose that is. That's insane. I don't even need to measure it. I already know how just insanely big these gaps are. So we're gonna do some valve adjustments and get this all buttoned up, finally. To make the head even more annoying, and thanks to this horn here, this is the total clearance I have to tighten this bolt. Slow going. We're back in it. We cracked open the head again because I ran this around just a little bit just to make sure that everything was okay and there was nothing crazy that was going on. Everything rode fine. However, it was sounding a little tappy, a little bit more so than usual. And so I just wanted to pull this off again just to double check now that it's kind of gone through the gears with some revs, some actual tension, you know, on this chain to make sure that everything was A, still in time, and B, still in clearance. So checked those and they were just fine. And actually kind of taking a look at the clearance for the DCR cam versus stock, it's like double the clearance. DCR cam requires 0.006 to 0.008 inches, which compared to Benelli's stock, I thought it was the same, but it was 0.08 millimeter, which equates to about 0.003 inches. So it's basically double the clearance. So that's why it's sounding a little tappy. So it's nice to know that everything's still in time and everything's still in clearance. So that's good. I guess it's just one of those things that I have to deal with. There's going to be just a little bit extra noise on the top end here. So as I said, with the new cam comes the tune. And so you can see the ECU's gone. I don't have the ECU right now. It's actually been shipped out. There is a guy in Las Vegas who has the ability to reflash Benelli ECUs, and he charges 175 bucks and basically will tune it to whatever modifications that you have to intake and exhaust. And so I shipped that off to him yesterday. He should be getting it pretty soon. I'll talk with him. We'll have some back and forth, let him know kind of the things that I've done to this, you know, the intake here and down below the decat, to make sure that he has that information so that he can use that to reflash it, knowing that we have those modifications and knowing that we have a new cam in here. A few people on the Facebook groups have mentioned that he's done really good work and are really happy with those reflashes, and I've been happy personally with reflashes. I have a reflash in the Grum and it's been working flawlessly for the year plus that I've had it. So I think this is a great alternative to swapping out this with something like a Power Commander or an A-Racer that's, you know, double, even triple the price of that. So I'm really happy with that. And in the next week, I should be getting that back, and then we can button everything up finally and reset the ECU and actually test this thing out and see how it does.
Later.
Look what I got in the mail. So here we have it. Just a stock ECU, nothing special about it, just reflashed. So let's go ahead and plug this thing back in, get everything all buttoned up. We'll reset the battery, and then let's go ride this thing. You're home now. Let's start it up real quick, make sure I did it right. Good sign, good sign. No sparks.
Now we're talking. So I've ridden about 15 miles or so since I put the ECU back in, and it's still, you know, getting to know the system, kind of relearning things. So I don't expect it to be 100% what it's going to be every day right now, but I'm starting to notice the differences. It's very cammy. I don't know if the mic will pick that up, but you can really hear the cam at idle. It sounds like a cold start. You also still hear the valve tick, which I guess is just something I'm gonna have to learn to live with. I checked and I rechecked, everything is still in spec, but I guess it just is what it is. Alright, once this thing turns green, let's see. Here we go. It gets to 9,000 RPM so fast. we go. Here's a steep uphill. Dropping down to the third, which is a little bit tall of a gear for that corner, but even uphill, it's still chugging along. The torque's definitely there. That's pretty good. I'm liking this. I think the only downsides of this setup now is the valve tick is very prominent. It almost sounds like there's a problem, but it really isn't. I've checked. I don't know for sure yet, but I'm pretty sure that this map is going to drop my fuel economy even more. It was already kind of dipping with some of the modifications that I've done, and I was getting more like high 80s, and so I'm probably going to be in the mid to low 80s now with this. All in all, this is a great setup and fairly cheap compared to what my other options were. I'm always a huge fan of reflashes. They're so much easier for people like me who can't really tune on my own. I would not have any idea what I'm doing, and it's one of those cases where have a professional touch it or otherwise just leave it alone, that type of deal. So that's what I'm doing here. Ooh, a 3000 GT. But reflashes are so nice, they're so easy, they're just kind of like ready to go right out of the box. So, to the man who gave me my reflash, thank you very much. I'm very pleased with it so far. I'm not sure if he wants a shout out or not, so I'll just say that you can find him on the TNT USA owners Facebook page. That's where I found him. A lot of people mentioned his work and have used his reflashes and have all said good things. His prices are fair and his turnaround is pretty quick. I got this within a week, so very, very much thankful for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to go and continue to ride and enjoy this on probably a road a little bit faster than this. So, see ya.